Hi, this is Brent, the Climate Guru. We're going to explore today how the heating of the oceans from climate change have caused more powerful hurricanes like Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton that recently struck Florida. I was here to experience those storms, and I'm here to report about it. Hurricane Helene struck the Big Bend area of Florida. That's the curved coastal area. They call it the Big Bend, south of Tallahassee and east of the Florida Panhandle. It was the deadliest hurricane to hit the U.S. mainland since Katrina, which remember hit New Orleans and destroyed much of New Orleans with storm surge and winds in 2005. Helene began forming in the Western Caribbean Sea September 22nd. About a month ago, it became a tropical storm on September 24th as it approached the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, and became a named hurricane on September 25th, the next day. As Helene went across a very warm 85-degree water Gulf of Mexico on September 25th, it rapidly intensified with a clearly defined eye. By September 26th, the next day, it became a Category 4 storm. When it made landfall at the Big Bend, it had maximum sustained winds of 140 miles per hour. So the issue is oceans warm, the Gulf of Mexico warmed, very high temperature, 85 degrees. And how does that influence the power and how quickly these storms develop into Category 3, 4, 5 storms? October 9th, researchers at the World Weather Attribution stated that with high confidence, Helene was made worse by climate change. I was here during the hurricanes and explored the areas where this occurred days following it. Helene traversed the Gulf waters off Florida's west coast and brought very high winds and storm surge and extreme rainfall. It claimed 12 lives near Tampa Bay in the St. Petersburg area. It was a very big storm, 200 miles wide, and had 140-mile sustained winds near the eye. The forecasts were that it would have a very high storm surge in the St. Pete, Tampa Bay area, in particular, many islands, barrier islands, where there are many homes off of St. Pete. The outer bands of Helene came ashore just south of Tampa, St. Pete area, as a very powerful storm surge that broke all records. I have a close friend who decided to stay in his house in St. Pete Beach with his wife and one-year-old child on a barrier island, St. Pete Beach, where there are many homes, restaurants, and so on. He lived only one block from the Gulf, and I told him, as someone who had been through many hurricanes in Florida, he should not stay, he should leave, come to my house, which was further inland. But he decided to stay. Like many folks who've come to Florida over the last 10 or 20 years, he's from the Midwest, does not really understand the power and danger of hurricanes. He stayed, and unfortunately, the Gulf waters in the St. Pete Beach area are shallow, which push up wave height very quickly. He was in his house, and late that night, the water started to cover his ankle deep for he and his wife, holding their child. And as night fell on St. Pete Beach, suddenly within just 30 or 40 minutes, the waters rose very quickly to waist high. Frightening, dangerous. To survive and avoid drowning, he had to get his wife and baby out of the house where they were trapped from rising waters. They got outside and waded and swam across the street in front of their house with powerful rushing waters like a river around the house. Somehow he and his wife and baby got through the powerful currents. They weren't swept away. And thank goodness they reached another nearby house that had a second story where they waited till the waters receded the next day and saw their home destroyed. I went the next day to St. Pete Beach to help him. Law enforcement wouldn't let anybody onto the island. They blocked bridges from looters and so on. The storm waters had receded, but I saw many boats, sail and powerboats, sitting on streets, on dry streets and parks where they've been lifted by the storm surge. It eventually made landfall in the Big Bend with sustained winds of 140 miles an hour. that hit that area of Florida. I grew up in Florida, in Miami, and as a child, we had hurricanes every year, every hurricane season. We were instructed in elementary and middle school to go home. We were used to that. We went home, helped our families prepare our homes, put tape on the windows, brought furniture inside from the patios, and waited out the storm. We'd be inside with extra food and water, and we'd look outside and see large trees coming down, things flying about, often crashed windows, but nothing that was of such a power that destroyed our homes. We were quite used to it. In 1992, I lived in Homestead, which is an agricultural area just south of Miami. My wife and I had just built a 10-acre farm, fruit orchards, and a home. We were there with our 2- and 3-year-old children. And Hurricane Andrew was predicted to come to Miami, which is 50, 60 miles north of Homestead. We decided to stay in the house, realizing that it wouldn't be coming towards us. At the last minute, Andrew veered south and went through the Upper Keys and right into Homestead where we lived. The storm's eye crossed our house, our farm. It was something that was unimaginable. It was a Category 5 storm, 165-mile-an-hour sustained winds. We're inside our new house. The house shook. Every door and window was blown in. 1/3 of the roof was gone. We were hiding in the pantry area with our kids, our babies. Wind was coming down the hallways of our house, blowing furniture out. It was horribly frightening, like a freight train coming through our house. Luckily, we were all okay. Nobody was hurt. And Hurricane Andrew passed very quickly. Its forward speed was very fast, went towards the Everglades, and it was over. At 5 or 6 in the morning, we looked outside into our house, into the living room, and saw that it was totally destroyed inside. And we were giddy, like people who had survived a shipwreck. But we saw the power of storms, and our practice now is never to stay in the path of a hurricane and to leave. We realize what they can do. After Helene's outer bands devastated the St. Pete area around St. Petersburg and Hillsborough County, Tampa, it went north and, of course, crossed the Panhandle area and went into Georgia, western North Carolina, South Carolina, East Tennessee, and South Virginia. These areas had never seen the heavy rain that came down. Atlanta had 11 inches of rainfall, the greatest amount in over 100 years. As the rainfall came in the high mountains of western North Carolina, mountains 3,000 to 6,000 feet high, especially west of Asheville, North Carolina, the rains funneled down onto the rivers and streams. They overflowed, causing flash floods and floods as high as rooftops of homes. Homes were swept away in these horrible torrential floods, as were cars. Around Asheville are the French Broad River and Swanahawk Rivers, where they meet, and there was 20 inches of rain in 3 days. That's a once in 3,000 year meteorological event. The powerful currents, floods, and mudslides carried away homes. And unfortunately, the death toll was 300 from Helene and 124 in North Carolina, with 92 still missing. This is the highest death toll since Katrina hit New Orleans in 2005. There was 2 million without power and an estimated $250 billion damage to property. Unfortunately, a lot of these folks in the mountains didn't have flood insurance, obviously, and there's no way, it's difficult for them to rebuild. It's devastating the way it's affected those communities. Less than 2 weeks after Helene battered Florida and left many areas destroyed, including its northern route, Hurricane Milton came ashore. Hurricane Milton was the second most powerful storm ever recorded in the Gulf of Mexico after Hurricane Rita in 2005. It was developing as a tropical storm in the Caribbean, and October 5th, it moved into the Bay of Campeche off Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. And 2 days later, on October 7th, it continued to move across extremely warm waters of the Gulf. That same day, it went from a tropical storm to a hurricane. It exploded into a Category 5 hurricane with sustained winds of almost unimaginable 180 miles per hour. The Gulf of Mexico sea temperatures had heated to almost an unimaginable 88 degrees Fahrenheit. Very high humidity levels above the ocean, like nothing ever seen, from a tropical storm to a Category 5 hurricane within 24 hours. Came towards Florida's Gulf Coast and crossed Siesta Key, which is a barrier island, very heavily populated, right next to Sarasota, caused major flooding, crossed into Sarasota with its eye, and winds from the south, as the eye came across, it was counterclockwise, were powerful. And then as it began to cross, the next phase was winds from the north. As we had the other side of the storm, the winds were above 100 miles an hour. Some were measured at 120 after the eye passed. In the area of Sarasota, many huge pine trees came down, and huge stately old oak trees went down in the intense winds. Some homes suffered roof damage. Tropicana Field in St. Pete lost its roof, and the Sarasota-Bradenton Airport lost the entire roof of Concourse B. Milton continued to cross Florida towards the Atlantic, where it generated 126 tornadoes that killed 24 people. This was the fastest intensification of any hurricane on record, as again, a tropical storm to a Category 5 in 24 hours. Fortunately, as it approached Florida, right before it made landfall, the wind shear slowed it down to a Category 3, and it made landfall with only 120 mile-an-hour winds with an 8-foot storm surge. Rescuers saved 565 people from a Clearwater apartment complex near Tampa, where flooding was neck-deep in some places. 1,000 people and 100 animals were rescued in Florida. October 13th, President Biden flew to MacDill Air Force Base, Tampa, and on Air Force One, they embarked on Marine One for an aerial tour of St. Pete, and he met with local officials. Notably absent was Governor DeSantis, who is a big supporter of big oil and has done nothing whatsoever to help Floridians fight climate change. Then he departed in a motorcade and traveled to St. Pete Beach, where the president met with residents and first responders. Estimated $50 billion damage from Hurricane Milton. So what does climate change and the heating of the world's oceans have to do with these more powerful superstorms? Ocean temperature is what fuels hurricanes, and the moisture above the ocean, hot ocean surfaces, is what holds huge amounts of moisture, which eventually drop deluges of water on the land areas that it crosses. Oceans are 71% of the Earth's surface, and they absorb 93% of the excess heat generated by humans from greenhouse gases that trap the heat in the atmosphere. The water of the oceans have a very high absorptive and storage capacity for heat. And the top few meters of the ocean absorb as much heat as the entire atmosphere in the world. The oceans have always moderated extreme temperatures and continue to do so by absorbing these vast amounts of heat from global warming as a result of human-caused climate change. The oceans are saving us from self-destruction by absorbing 93% of this excess heat that we generate. But there are limits of how much the oceans can absorb and store in heat. The Earth's global surface temperatures, including land and oceans, are breaking all records. 2023 was the hottest year on record, reaching 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and 2024 is breaking all those records again. The ocean temperatures heat less than land, but they have increased to 1 degree centigrade above pre-industrial levels. The last 7 years have seen ocean temperatures smash all previous records. To have an idea how much heat the oceans absorb from human-induced climate change, the oceans absorb as much heat as 8 Hiroshima atomic bombs every second, the entire year. According to the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, the oceans absorb the heat equivalent to 25 billion Hiroshima bombs from 1971 to 2018. Can we imagine that? Oceans have seen temperatures heat so much in recent years that NOAA scientists have determined that storm intensity has increased 6% per decade since the last 40 years and are now 25% higher. They determined the ocean's excess heat are fueling these more powerful storms. Research from Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory found that in some parts of Georgia and North Carolina, climate change increased the rainfall from these storms by as much as 50%. Research with the World Weather Attribution said with high confidence, Helene is made much worse by climate change, and it had 10% more rain and winds that were 13 miles per hour greater, and drew energy from water that was 2.3 degrees Fahrenheit warmer due to climate change. This 13 miles per hour increase in winds meant that the destruction of the hurricanes grew by 50%. And they found that climate change increased the destruction from the hurricanes by more than twice. One of the other problems that contributes to huge waves and, of course, rising oceans from storm surge is sea level rise. In the last 60 or 70 years, the oceans have risen on average globally about 8 inches. And they're expected to increase till the end of the century by as much as a couple of more feet or more, according to climate scientists. One of the things that contribute to ocean sea level rise is that water expands when it becomes warmer. And 40% of sea level rise is attributed to warmer oceans absorbing all of this heat. The oceans absorb the excess heat from the atmosphere in the upper layers of the ocean surface, the top 700 meters. But now, because of the excess heat coming into the oceans, we said 93% of the heat caused by human activities from climate change are going to the oceans. Now the lower depths below 2,000 meters are heating. This affects hurricanes because as the hurricanes stir up the surface of the waters, the colder depths formerly came up and cooled the hurricane, slowing down its intensity. But now the lower depths of the oceans are hotter, and now when the surface of the ocean is stirred up, those hotter depths are increasing the power and formation of hurricanes. The other problem is that warm air above the storm is able to hold more moisture. Warmer air holds more moisture. As it crosses land, it falls as very heavy rain. This is what happened as Helene dropped 20 inches of rain in 3 days in western areas of the mountains of North Carolina, flooding rivers, valleys, massive mudslides, carrying away cars, homes, and killing many people. The heat stored in the oceans can remain there for decades after it's absorbed. But the scientists are concerned that the oceans may reach their heat absorptive capacity. And instead of absorbing more heat, they may begin to emit heat into the atmosphere at some time in the future. The Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute scientists in Massachusetts found that the rate of warming in the top 6,500 feet of the ocean is about 40% higher in the last few decades than they previously estimated. Water can hold more heat than land, so it warms more slowly. But scientists found this rate is still alarming, and the oceans can't hold this heat forever. Eventually, it will be released, feeding back into the climate system and causing even further warming. One of the main negative effects of warming oceans is on marine life. They live mostly in the upper layers of the ocean where the heating occurs the most. Fish species are now migrating north to cooler temperatures for food sources, and rising temperatures in the ocean contribute to oxygen-depleted ocean dead zones. The hotter the oceans and the more acid in the oceans from climate change, the less oxygen that the oceans can store, and of course that's necessary to sustain life in the ocean. Carbon dioxide, of course, is the main greenhouse gas, and so where does it go when it's emitted into the atmosphere? The part that doesn't go into the atmosphere goes onto land and in the oceans. The oceans absorb about 30% of the carbon dioxide emitted from humans, and it causes ocean acidification. pH of the oceans change, and that causes damage to shell-forming organisms because their calcium carbonate shells and skeletons need a certain pH to develop. Corals, clams, snails, and other organisms. The excess carbon emissions that we are developing, we have caused over the last more than 100 years, causes the air to increase in temperature from the greenhouse effect, and that heat, 93% is absorbed into the oceans, which exacerbates hurricanes, increases their intensity and how rapidly they increase. And a very negative side effect is warmer oceans hold less oxygen necessary for marine life, and increased carbon emissions cause ocean acidification, changing the chemistry of the oceans and inhibiting certain marine organisms. So we need to reduce carbon emissions to reduce the amount of climate change, increases in temperature in the atmosphere, and that which is absorbed into the oceans. The oceans are very forgiving, and they have moderated temperatures in the world and continue to do so, and they made life on Earth possible. If the oceans did not absorb 93% of the excess heat caused by human activities, life on Earth would be impossible because of very high temperatures. Thanks for tuning in to the Climate Guru podcast. Stay inspired, stay informed, and keep taking action for our planet's future. Until next time, and remember, together we can make a difference.